Sorry guys, I didn't see you there. However, I was just waiting for my phone to finish charging. You know how that is. You used it all, and now you're just waiting for it to charge again, for you to then use it again to play games and waste your time. But no, we're gonna be productive making this video. And actually, have you ever sat down and thought about how do the batteries actually work? How does the phone charge, from that cable? Where does the electricity just come from? Okay? And that's what this video is going to be about. We're going to look into structure of batteries, history, and how it works to truly understand, what have scientists gone through for us to have such access. Okay? So let's begin. Okay, so first of all, we need to understand two very important terms: energy and, well, obviously, batteries. So what is energy? Energy is simply the ability to get work done. Okay, that's it. So when you walk, when you eat, when you breathe, that's work being done, that's energy. In the case of materials and items, when you stretch a rubber band, it's doing work as it stretches. When a car moves, it's doing work because it's moving, right? And that's what energy occurs. That's what energy is. Therefore, batteries are simply a device that converts chemical energy into electricity. And this definition sounds so simple, but the time, the effort, the science, and everything that went into making batteries possible is so incredibly complex for such a simple definition. Okay, imagine this. You wake up one day, you go to the back garden, and you see a dead frog. Okay, that's sad. But when an electrical spark touches the leg of the dead frog, it just twitches. And obviously, when you think about it, that doesn't make sense because the frog is supposed to be dead. How could it possibly twitch? Therefore, that must mean that the energy came from the leg. And now you just discovered animal electricity. Well, that was true. That was an actual true story for Luigi Galvani in 1780, an Italian physicist and scientist. He truly made that discovery and he believed it was real. Unfortunately, that was not the situation. His contemporary, Alessandro Volta, disagreed with him. No offense, my friend, but it just doesn't make sense. What do you mean by animal electricity? So obviously you can't just deny somebody's proof or observation without having your own proof and your own observation, or then disprove their own proof and their own observation. That's the thing in the scientist world. If you want to say no to something, you must have your evidence for saying no. Okay? And Volta did that. He started doing experiments, okay? And in 1800, that's the creation of the voltaic pile came about, which was just metal stacked on top of each other with discs of copper and zinc in between electrolyte moist substance in between each of them. And it was just a big pile, and these were able to conduct electricity. And although they couldn't actually make an electric spark at the time with the early stage of it, that was the birth of batteries. That was a true revolutionary moment, you know? And that's how scientists then started working on it, improving on it, and now we have our compact, very small batteries that can go into phones, into cars, and into anything and everything we need, really. So now that we've learned about the history of batteries, which I must say was quite interesting, frogs, water, really nice story. But let's move on. So now we're going to actually look into how do batteries really work? What's inside of them? I guess that was the whole point of this video. It may have been a bit of a long-winded thought. But here I have a battery, and now let's zoom in. So let's start with the electrodes. We have the cathode and the anode. And obviously, first of all, it's important for me to explain what electrodes even are. So electrodes are electrical conductors which will make contact with the non-metallic part of a circuit, which means that these connect the battery terminals to the electrolyte. Okay? And the cathode, I like to remember it by saying there's a cat in it. So like cat iron, And cats tend to be like, quite cute, quite happy. So that means that the cathode is the positively charged electrode. Okay, therefore it attracts the negatively charged ions. That's important to remember. Then we have our anode. And anodes is like anions, onions make you cry, they're sad. So anions are the negatively charged electrodes. Oh my gosh, wait. Anodes are the negatively charged electrodes. And they are the ones that therefore attract the positively charged ions. And that's it for our electrodes. Moving on, we next up have our electrolyte, which is simply a chemical substance that allows for the flow of ions between the two electrodes. Okay? And this is very important because without the electrolyte, there won't really be a flow of anything. Because ions are the ones that can move in a substance. Meanwhile, the elements and atoms and stuff like that, they can't move because they need an electron. Okay? Yes. After the electrolyte, we now have the separator, which I feel like sometimes is forgotten about, but it's really important because it prevents the anode and the cathode from reacting. Just think about it. If the anode is negative and the cathode is positive, they're obviously going to be attracted to each other and will want to react, which is why we need a separator to prevent that. Because if they do react, then how can the ions that they will release through the electrolyte be able to react? That means the circuit would break and there wouldn't be a flow of electrons anymore because the electrons are gonna react with each other and they're gonna use themselves up. An unwanted reaction causing instability in the cell and a complete dysfunctionality either way. So the separator is very, very important. Have I forgot a part? We have our anode, we have our cathode, we have our electrolyte, and we have our separator. I've mentioned all the main important components that can be found in a battery. So we're going to just zoom in a bit further into the materials that are being used for the parts of the battery, specifically lithium ion batteries. But we're just going to look at the materials that are used for the cathode and the anode. So for the cathode, we have the lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Lithium is in group 1 and it is highly reactive and it's the main charge carrier. The main charge carrier just simply means that it would kick off the reaction as it releases its positive Li plus ions, which will then move towards the anode and start the whole circuit. Then we move on to cobalt, which is also within the cathode, and it has a high density and it has a very stable structure, which is really important and needed when it comes to battery technologies. Then finally, we have a nickel, which has a very good thermostability and it is really high in capacity. So that's it for our cathode materials within lithium ion batteries specifically. For anode materials, there's only one because that's the most popular choice usually, which is carbon. And the reason is because it is a layered graphite. It is a very good conductor and it would host the lithium ions, which means that when we're doing the process of charging, once the lithium ions travel across towards the anode, the carbon would then host the Li ions, so they would keep them, right? They would store them. Okay, energy storage, which is how your phone or the battery is actually charging. So that's it for our specific look into the materials that are being used for the electrodes in a lithium ion battery. So now let's put all of this together to look into actually, okay, how does it start and end? What happens inside the battery when it charges and what happens inside the battery when it discharges. So when charging your device, we have our positively charged lithium ions moving from the cathode to the anode through the electrolyte. And then we have the electrons that are externally released from the positive terminal to the negative terminal, therefore storing the ions, storing the energy. Okay, and this happens through the process of intercalation, definition explained below. However, when discharging, the opposite, but not necessarily the opposite, happens because instead we have our lithium ions moving from the anode to the cathode through the electrolyte. Okay, so we have a circular motion throughout the circuit. Okay, we don't want to break the circuit. So the lithium ions are moving from the anode back to the cathode to the electrolyte. However, electrons are still being released, but instead of being released from the positive to the negative, they're now being released from the negative terminal to the positive terminal, therefore powering the device, allowing us to use our phones out of the cable. However, then the battery is going down. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's the process of charging and discharging. Also, almost forgot, once we have the process of the powering of the device with the electrons moving from the negative to the positive terminal, the cathode is reabsorbing the lithium ions as the current. So once it reabsorbs them, that's why your battery goes down. There's that visual representation showing you that, oh, you're losing charge, you're losing battery. Because the ions are getting reabsorbed back into the cathode, so the process can start again. Okay, so now we're coming to an end of our episode today, episode one in the battery series. And whilst we have realized that batteries are pretty amazing in the way they work, we do have to recognize that there are some challenges with them. And that's what we're going to look into for the next video. What can be done to solve some of the problems that batteries bring along with their benefits. They power our world, our education, the entertainment that we get. However, there's problems with the recycling, the reusing of it, the scarcity of the materials that are sourced for such powerful small things. There's so many things that are dangerous about it. If you can see, there's so many things and precautions with batteries. So we're going to look into for the next episode, what are some things that have been done against these challenges? How they're being looked into, how are they being targeted more specifically. So until then, I'll see you next time. And now I'm really, really, really going to wait for my phone to finish charging. Bye bye.